Well, I think it's time for another Unfound Live. What do all of you say? What do all of you say? Hello, everyone. And it is the Unfound Live for April 14th, 2021. Hope everybody is doing well. I'm doing good. Let me see here. What's on the screen here? Okay. Getting work done here. As usual, I have a action-packed show for you tonight. A lot of things to discuss, and even going up to just a few minutes before I turned the camera on, that something that I included in there that I wanted to talk about. But I'm doing great. It was kind of some rough weather here this past weekend, but since then, Monday, Tuesday, and today, it has been absolutely beautiful. I think it was 87 degrees or something like that tonight. So let's see who's in here, and then we'll start into this. Hey, there's D. Hello to you, D. Good to see you, D. Hello, Karen and CR. Good to see CR. Hello, CR. Come on, Eileen. Melissa.
Hello, Melissa.
Louise, what's going on? Linda. Joyce. Always love to see Joyce Rivatuzo during these shows and during the think tank. Delane. And Screaming. Hey, Heather. My assistant, Heather. Everybody say hello to my assistant, Heather, who is waving there tonight. Hello, Heather. Jasmine. Twinkle. Linda says, this will be an interesting listen with my daughter watching Criminal Minds in the background. That should be interesting. Not a huge fan of that show. I know what it is, but okay. Hello, Kathy from California. My assistant, Sheree, thank you for doing the moderating tonight, Sheree. Appreciate it. Susan. And who else? We got some, I want to go down. Fishing. There we go. Fishing. Good to see all of you tonight. I hope. Heather says it's been a while. It has been a while, Heather, now that you bring it up. It has been a while, but always good to see you, Heather. Good to see you. Fishing, just got home from work. Love you all from Bama, Alabama. Roll Tide. Yes, so, I've been getting some things, trying to get some things done around here besides doing unfound work and disc golf. Two major things in my life. I finally got this closet. Maybe I talked about this last week. This closet that is over in my bedroom, the master bedroom, walk-in closet, fairly large, and I had a lot of stuff in there. And I really got rid of quite a few stuff. I must have brought 50 T-shirts, a combination of T-shirts, sweatshirts, sweatpants, things like that, apparel of one kind or another to Goodwill last week. Seriously. And also took a lot of dishes and cups and things. And it just was, that closet was getting out of control. It looked like, I don't have any kids, but it looked like a teenager's bedroom. And I said, I got to do something about this. So between work and everything, I found some time to take everything out of it. Go through it all. Give stuff away. Throw out some things. And then put everything back in there in an order so I know where it is. And a lot of the things, of course, I would never throw out there. Like photo albums and things like that I have, some personal effects. And they're in boxes or wrapped up or something. And so they're in the back. I know I never have to get to them. And then things that maybe I will have to get to at some point or another. Where I can access them a lot more easily. man, it felt good to get that done. That thing, because the closet is, the door to it is in my bathroom. So when I'm looking at the mirror in the bathroom, the closet is behind me, and so I see it all the time. And it just got to the point where I said, I can't live with this anymore. And so I got it done, and it was good. So I did that, and so some other things just things that, little things that have to be done around here that involve me. It has nothing to do with the people who own this condo or anything like that. Although I did get some tile work done in the shower a few weeks ago. So that's kind of what I've been doing. Speaking of disc golf, mentioned it, always mention it on the live show. Always. I played in a tournament this weekend and played really well. However, the results were kind of discarded because not everybody in my division finished, because there were tee times and a really, really bad succession of storms came through her. I got done around 2:00 on Saturday. Well, right after like 3:00, these rains and everything came through, so people didn't get to finish. Well, the rule is, if people in your division don't get to finish, then the results are forfeited. Well, it turns out that if some of you saw that I posted, I still got credited for tying for first place in my division, but my round does not count toward my PDGA rating. So, but I'll take it. It's my first win. It was my first win in 2,218 days. And it was only in a division that was very, very small, 4 guys, but still, I still played very, very well. Made some mistakes, but I cannot complain. And so it was a long time coming. As I've talked about, I had some issues out on the disc golf course for about 5 years. Concentration issues, confidence issues, a lot of things put together. And I've been able to work out of that over like the last 6 months, finally. And so it was a long time coming, and it felt really good. Really tough conditions. It was very windy on Saturday, but I got it done. So this weekend, though, I have a 2-day tournament at Coachman right over here in Clearwater, about 20 minutes away. And I don't know what my tee time is yet. It will surely be earlier on Saturday morning. I would not be surprised if it's like 9 a.m. or something like that. So I'll probably be done by noon or something. It'll go real fast. So 2-day tournament, 1 round each day, tee times each day. So that's coming up. And then next weekend, so like a week and a half from now, we're playing another tournament at that same course, but I'll be playing in a different division. So that's what's coming up. And then after that, I really don't have another official tournament until like end of May. I am, as some of you know, I have sponsored a women's tournament that's coming up here in my area, at my home course in Largo, Florida, on May 8th. And so I will be involved in that. I will be over there. I'll be volunteering. I don't know if I'll be doing paperwork for everybody, or I'll be doing spotting or something, looking where, if discs are going to go in the water, something like that. But I will be over there volunteering. Really looking forward to that. That's a 1-day tournament just for women. And I posted in the, you see in the discussion group, that I am, Unfound is a sponsor of that. I made a donation to the tournament to have Unfound's name mentioned as a sponsor. So I am excited about that, going over there. And I certainly believe in disc golf, and I think it's a great sport. And I certainly want women in particular to take an interest in it. I believe it to be a great sport, particularly for women. So I wanted to make sure that I supported it. And my friend Alicia, who was my disc golf doubles partner way back in 2018, is running it. So I wanted to help her out as well. Valerie says, hello. I'm swamped with charting, but we'll listen tomorrow while driving in between patients. Okay, Valerie. Screaming, I hope you didn't get rid of any Iron Maiden shirts, Ed. I would have bought them from you. No. All Iron Maiden shirts will be with Ed. Speaking of myself in the third person. Forever. Screaming, don't have any doubts about that. And you should know I have other concert shirts too. I have 2 Judas Priest shirts. I have 3 Def Leppard shirts, but only 2 of them fit me. One's a little small. I have a couple Kiss shirts. I have a Kix, K-I-X shirt. Love them. I have a Van Halen shirt. I have a Badlands shirt. I have a Tesla from Mechanical Resonance shirt. I have a Megadeth shirt, a Deep Purple shirt. But of course, the most I have are Iron Maiden shirts. I may have 10 Iron Maiden shirts, maybe something like that. So no, none of those are getting thrown out. Those are with me forever. Thank you for bringing that up, Screaming. Good question. Twinkle says, I'm going to Goodwill this weekend with my closet stuff. Good for you, Twinkle. Good for you. Melissa, I've got 2 bedrooms with 3 teens, and I'm doing the same thing. It's like a tornado in there. I believe it, Melissa. If you say it, I believe it. Let me see here. But yes. Here, LaFord. Hey, LaFord's there. LaFord's here. And Laura. Good to see you. D says, hey, Ed, I have a question for you. If you were to buy a camper and could travel anywhere in the United States, where would you go? I would go everywhere, D. There's still many things that I've not seen in the United States. It's funny you bring that up, D, because my brother and his wife are toying around with the idea of buying one of these older refurbished GMC RVs that they made in the late 70s that are like collector's items now. People actually buy them and refurbish them, and they're known for being very reliable. And they're thinking about buying one of those and touring and just driving around there. My brother's told me they've even thought about selling their house. We'll see. But there are a lot of things, D, that I have yet to see in the United States. There are still a few states that I've not been to. For example, I've never been to the Dakotas. I've never been to Montana. I've never been to Washington. I've never been to Alaska. And so I don't, I think that one of the things I would like to do if I have the time, I don't think I'm ever going to have the time, but would certainly like to check out like Civil War battlefields, being that I am here on the East Coast, going to those places where some of these battles and things occurred. That sounds interesting to me. So maybe going to Mount Rushmore. Those are some of those things. But it's one of those issues also, D, that of course, as you know, I am a single guy and everything. Do I want to do those things by myself? So we'll just have to see. That's a great question though, D. I have thought about it. My brother and his wife are certainly thinking about it. Maybe I might tag along for one of their trips. I don't know. But there's still a lot of things that I would like to see. I've been very fortunate that I got to go to Hawaii. Like I was there in 1995. That was very neat. Got to go to Pearl Harbor and everything. So, but certainly I would love to drive and see a lot of these places, D. That's a great question. Thank you. D says, learn how to play disc golf. All you got to do is watch some videos, D, on YouTube. Linda says, love your taste in music. Linda, it's weird. I'm a big fan of the Rock and Roll Reporter. He hosts a show on satellite radio. His name also happens to be Ed. His name is Eddie Trunk. I think he does a fantastic job. I think he's great. I think he's very objective about music and everything. But he's talked about this before. It's amazing how a lot of bands from for example, the 1980s don't get any respect. I know, people think of them as hair bands, which is a pejorative. That is not a positive term. That's a negative term in my mind. But there are other bands that the media, the big media, I guess, in entertainment have paid attention to that did not sell even as close to as many albums or CDs and were not as popular, and they get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of bands that were crazy popular in the 80s, like Dokken. Do I have a Dokken shirt? I don't. Maybe I think about getting one. Rat, groups like that were hugely popular, sold out stadiums and everything else. They're not even considered for something like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but these groups that were not as well known at all do get in. There seems to be a bias against that kind, unless you're really you can't be denied, like Def Leppard, for example. But that late 70s into late 80s bands, a lot of them have been ignored. Iron Maiden is one of them. Iron Maiden still sells out arenas today. Can't get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Judas Priest, a huge number of popular songs get played all over satellite radio, regular radio, on and on. They're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I could talk about this topic for an hour, but they are fantastic. The biggest complaint I have about, and I like some 90s music. I've listened to some Pearl Jam, to some Alice in Chains, and some other groups like that. Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins. They certainly have a following. They certainly have some nice songs and everything. But to me, the musicianship went down in the 1990s. There were no Eddie Van Halens or Bruce Dickinson singing, or anybody like that. I think the music got a bit simpler, and I didn't particularly care for it for the most part. Like I said, I do like some of the songs and everything, but I think as me being a former musician, I look at it and I think that the musicianship went down in the 1990s, and I think that is continued for a lot of groups that have come out in the 90s and later, my opinion. So there you go. Linda says the 80s were the best. They were a great time. I mean, there were a lot of bad things that went on there too, Linda. I remember my childhood growing up in the 80s very fondly, but the 90s were a good decade for me as well. The 2000s were a good decade for me. Of course, the 2010s have been a good decade. I think it was a nice mixture in the 1980s. The 70s had great music, but the cars weren't that great. A lot of bad things going on in the 70s, but I can't complain. But I'm a big fan of 1970s and 1980s music, 1970s, particularly movies. I think that movies in the 1970s were the best. That was the best decade for movies ever. But certainly today, technology, a lot of things are better now. And certainly cars and houses and all sorts of other things are much better now. But I think when it comes to entertainment, music, film, art, I don't think anything that is done today can rival 40, 50 years ago, my opinion. Fishing says, I've been to East to West Coast flying over. You miss so much. Moving, meaning, sights. It was all work related for me. Yeah, that's one of the bad spots, bad parts of flying. And some would say that's one of the bad points of the interstate highway system that got set up in the 1950s, that all of these little nooks and crannies across the United States now get passed up. In fact, that's the movie, the Pixar movie Cars. That's exactly what that movie is about. Screaming loves Judas Priest. Who doesn't love Judas Priest screaming? The Savior says the 70s. Yep. Linda, a friend of mine actually was on a game show with Ozzy Osbourne. It was Who Knew Ozzy Better? I love that. Yeah, I don't have any Ozzy shirts either. I'll let you bring that up. Fishing says you need to widen your horizons to the country music. That would only be narrowing my horizons. Fishing, although I do love old country music. I love Johnny Paycheck, Charlie Rich, Patsy Cline, some old Dolly Parton and everything. But you start getting into the 80s and onwards, everything sounds the same to me. And I think country music is overtly marketed. And there's just something about it that's different. I can't ignore the point that, what are the odds that for example, being that I'm a straight guy, I'm a heterosexual guy, I like women. It does not escape my eyes that every female country western singer is very, very attractive. Is that just by luck, or is there marketing behind it? Because in rock and roll, we have Janis Joplin. Not the easiest woman on the eyes, but just so good. Joan Jett. Now, of course, we do have some attractive ones. Of course, Stevie Nicks back in the day, Lita Ford. But I think that rock and roll, at least when it comes to females, I think that rock and roll treats their voice and artistry much more honestly than country music does. I think country music, it's more about the looks. And that's what I see. A rainbow. I love Rainbow with and without Ronnie James Dio, the Savior. Love them. Love some Richie Blackmore, Ronnie James Dio. I love it. Let's see here. Linda says, my mom, who is 82, loves Twisted Sister. I love Twisted Sister too. D, I was a truck driver and seen it all, but did not get to have fun doing it. Yeah, well, you got to see it, I guess, for free, D. I do, like I said, Xavier, I do jam Rainbow. Very good. They did what? Snowblind. Was that Snowblind? Is that right, Rainbow? But yeah, big fan. But then I followed Ronnie James Dio when he became, of course, just the group Dio, and their guitarist is now with Def Leppard. Love all of it. D. Kaufman, 2000s is when country music died. Boy, we've gotten off on a tangent tonight. Screaming. I always love old country and rockabilly. D's hair was awesome. Fishing, that's what I'm talking about. Elizabeth Samet. I love Juice Newton. Juice Newton. I love older country music like the 70s. I love Johnny Paycheck. Take this job and shove it. I don't want to work here no more. No more. Woman done left. Left all the reason that I was working for. Get out of my way because I'm a walk-in out the door. Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. Don't tell me I don't know my Johnny Paycheck. Grew up on that on 8-track. Wild Hair. So yeah, some good. I could talk music, culture, and stuff forever. So disc golf, and talked about that. It's been beautiful here. I'm continuing to work on my, I should say about music, I cannot wait till concerts start again. Because I know every big group is going to be dying to get back out on the road and make some money, because that's mainly how they make their money these days. So AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Kiss, or of course they said they're not touring anymore. That's such a joke. Def Leppard. I just can't imagine all of the groups, bands that I listen to, even though they're old and some of the members have changed. I got to believe like maybe later here in 2021, of course into 2022, just cannot wait. You just don't even know. Cannot wait. And I was hoping they'd come out with some new albums, being now that they have all this time just sitting around. Maybe they'll be doing that too. I'm really looking forward to that too, if they can bring out some new music. Of course, AC/DC did bring out a new album some months ago, and it was very, very good. I really like it. Abs and diet. I'm doing my abs workout every night, noticing a lot of changes. I think I said the last couple weeks that back in mid-March, I was like 190 pounds, which is not good. I got up this morning, got on the scale. I was 183.4 pounds. And I will continue to tell all of you it's a combination of eating about 1,800 calories a day, maybe a little less than that, keeping track of it, getting allowances for any exercise or disc golf or anything else that I do. And then no sugar, no carbs. And I went out and played disc golf with my brother Brian yesterday, and I was telling him I can tell the difference out there on the course. I can definitely tell. No doubt in my mind. I just feel a little more agile, a little lighter, of course, a little thinner. And in my core, doing these ab workouts that I've done, using this one app, it's tough. It's tough. It's very good. And I feel very fortunate to be in the shape, the situation that I am at 50 years old. I feel very, very fortunate. The Savior, do you listen to Dream Theater? Not a lot. I know that one song. I can't think of the words right at this point. Really never got into them. I know they're a lot like Queensryche. They're a lot into concept albums and things like that, Xavier, but not really. I can remember around 2000, maybe 20 years ago, listening to some of their stuff, but I never really caught on with me. Xavier, I'm going to see Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush. Frank Marino was a cross-dressing entertainer in Las Vegas when I was there. Is that the same Frank Marino? Eileen, yes, I need the concerts back. I can't wait. Eileen is right about that. Delane says Kiss does a farewell tour every few years. Yes, they do. Just like Ozzy does. That's true, Delane, and that's why I brought it up. As I think D or somebody has already posted, maybe please give this video as a thumbs up as you are watching tonight. We haven't even gotten to all the true crime stuff that I have lined up here, but that's fine. We got like an hour and a half more. But please give this video a thumbs up as you are watching, because it's very important for the YouTube algorithms. And whether you're watching it live right now or you are watching a replay of this tomorrow or a week from now, please hit that thumbs up button. We would appreciate it at Unfound. The Xavier says, no, different person. Okay, I'm not familiar with that then, that particular guy then, Xavier. But there is a Frank. Is his first name Frank? His last name certainly Marino. That is a very well-known impersonator, cross-dressing impersonator in Las Vegas. Men dressing up as women and then pretending to be some famous actress or singer or something like that. Very, very well-known. Been there for years and years and years. And I think I mentioned this last week. I'm looking into buying another car. Not another car, and I don't want to say a new car. It's going to be a used car, but I'm looking to replace the car that I have now. I drive a Hyundai Sonata, and I would recommend those cars to anybody. The one that I've had is a 2016. I bought it used on the summer of 2017. So it's coming up on 4 years. Had about 37,000 miles on it. It was a rental car. I bought it from a Hertz dealership. It had just gotten through its period of being an actual rental car, probably at the Tampa airport or somewhere. And that car has been excellent. I just cannot say enough about that car. It's been the most reliable car I've ever owned. And it's been back and forth to Pennsylvania at least 6 times, maybe. Went back and forth to Amarillo. It's very comfortable to drive. Not the fastest car, but pretty good on gas. Really good stereo. The air conditioning's cold, and on and on and on. But it is up to about 80,000 miles. I've not had to put any money into it. I've never even had to change the brakes in 40,000 miles. So I must have had brand new brakes on it when I got it. Whereas the Taurus that I had before it seemed like it went through brakes all the time. I think it's because this Sonata has 4-wheel disc brakes, so it's a little easier on the front brakes. but it's been a really great car. The only thing I've had to buy some tires for it. In fact, it probably needs 2 tires now. And the keyless entry system doesn't work anymore, so I have to do it old school, sticking the key in the door and unlocking it. But it's been a really good car, but I think I'm ready to move on. The truth is, I don't need a car that big with 4 doors. And I never carry 4 people in a car, at the most 2, maybe me and my brother or maybe somebody else. And so I'm looking to get a little sportier. And so I'm looking around. It's going to be used. I know the price range that I'm looking at. I could probably still get $10,500 for my car, and I don't owe anything on it. So I could put that money towards something else. So I'm looking around. And got my eye. I'm not going to ruin it. Not going to jinx it. So I've been paying attention to Auto Trader and been watching some YouTube videos on this particular type of car and, what to look for and things that can go wrong and all of that. And I know that I'm going to make a decision this coming May. I'm going to have some weeks there where I don't have to go to any disc golf tournaments, which means I really don't have to drive anywhere if I don't want to. So I have some time to sell my car and find this kind that I am looking for. So I would recommend to anybody, if you're looking for a good used car, I would say Hyundai Sonatas. Now, like the 2018s have a bad reputation with their engines, but 2015, 2016, before they updated like the model a little bit and changed the exterior, are known as being very, very reliable cars, and I would recommend them to anybody. In fact, I would if you're into buying a new one, I would certainly recommend a Hyundai in anything, from their smallest car up to their big SUV, the Palisade. Is it the Palisade? Hyundai Palisade? Yeah. I would recommend any of them. Of course, they have those really good warranties for 100,000 miles, too. They're not paying me to say this. I'm just telling you, it's been a joy to have this car. But like I said, I'm just ready to move on. But it's been good. And I think I'll be able to sell it fairly quickly. And it's amazing how well that car has kept its value. I think that when I bought it in 2017, I think it was plus the tax and everything. I think it was like just under $14,000 with the taxes and fees and all that stuff. I can still get 10.5 for that car, even though I've put 40,000 miles on it. It's crazy. Hyundai's huge demand for them, so I might as well take advantage of it. Xavier, that song I know by Dream, pull me under, pull me under, pull me under. I'm not afraid. I know that song off the top of my head. That's like probably their best known song, at least to the public. It just came to me as I was thinking about it. The Xavier Vet. No, I'm not going to buy a Vet, Xavier. That's a little too midlife crisis car for me. Twinkle, I have 24,000 miles on my Mazda 6. Good for you, Twinkle Mazdas. My sister-in-law just got a Mazda SUV, a new one. It's beautiful. It's like really dark red. She loves it. They have very good reviews. The Xavier Audi Coupe. Always got to be afraid with Audis and their things that can go wrong on them, Xavier. I know the newer ones are much more reliable, but they are way out of my price range. So I would never buy an Audi in the price range that I'm looking at. But Audis are beautiful. These cars, Audi A7s, that A6 convertible with the fast engine and everything. Beautiful cars. Beautiful. Hellcat, no. Eileen has a Hyundai Tucson. Yeah, they're beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So I'm looking at a car, and when I get it, I will surely show you all of it. And if I get what I'm looking at, you will all probably be very interested to know what it is. But I've narrowed it down. I've narrowed it down to one type of car in one manufacturer, and that's it. Just got to find the right one with the right mileage, right price, etc. I think I'll be able to do that. Hello, Denise. What's going on? Let's move on to the topics that I have lined up now that we're 35 minutes into the show and we've talked about cars, music, disc golf. But this is what we do on the live show. It's a mixture. It's a little potpourri, a little smorgasbord, a little buffet of everything. Let's go to where I usually go first when we start talking about true crime topics. Let's talk about the Alwin Albright poll that was conducted in the discussion group since Saturday morning. You know, I report on this every week. And the choice that was the most popular by a wide margin is that Alwyn walked off and somehow died in the woods, probably by accident or had some sort of physical issue, stroke, heart attack, something like that. That was the most popular choice. And all of you should know in the think tank, that was also the most popular choice. In the group, we really tried to get into the nuts and bolts. Does this really look like some sort of foul play scenario? And I think what we decided was if all of these people were younger, if they were all 25 instead of them being in their 60s or 70s, if they were in their 20s, kind of decided that a foul play scenario, of course, would be something we would have to open our minds to a little bit more, even if it was all the same evidence. But being that we were dealing with people a little older, a lot older than a 25-year-old, that Alwyn walked off right after the police showed up, that can't deny that he was trying to get away from the police and that, what are the odds that he would have come back and everything else. And so the think tank agreed with the poll in the group. That doesn't happen a lot, maybe only 25% of the time. But everybody seems to think that Alwyn did walk off and died in the woods, and it wasn't due to foul play. This maybe is a little bit like somebody brought up David Hardy's disappearance, who, he's driving around. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but his family was allowing him to drive around, and he ended up on that street, somewhere he shouldn't have been, and his car is just sitting there. That is, of course, a possibility there. And maybe if you want to go a little bit in the other direction, Robert Cox, a man who was having some physical problems. But in that one, if you go back and listen to that episode, the interview with his sister, I think there's a much more likely, I'm not saying that's what happened, but it's easier to believe in his disappearance that there was foul play because he was in so much worse shape than Alwyn was. And so it's just hard to imagine that guy could have walked anywhere far. Where it's much easier to believe that Alwyn could have at least walked a little distance. He was much more physically capable than Robert Cox was. And we decided that, he could have gone a couple miles, even though it was Texas in the summer. So that was the Alwin Albright poll. And I will be talking to his niece, Sherry, sometime in the near future. Eileen says, I like the Veloster. I've heard of it. Cannot see it in my mind. Eileen. Fishing says, got to have four-wheel drive pickup or SUV. Really, Fishing, not really a pickup guy. I'm just not. Drove them when I worked for my family as used cars and all of that. Very good in the winter when it snowed in Pennsylvania. SUVs, same type of thing. But just really not me. Once again, I'm in too much vehicle for me. I don't haul things. I can't tell you the last time I went to Lowe's or Home Depot. I don't have a family. I don't have somewhere we're piling into the vehicle, 4 or 5 of us and going somewhere. That's just not my lifestyle. And so I'm trying to move into something that is more conducive to the kind of footprint I'm, putting on the earth. And I think that a 4-door car like the Sonata I have can better be used by somebody who needs that type of car. And, it can go to better use, and it still has a lot of life yet left in it. So that's kind of how I'm also thinking about all of this. Screaming is reminding everybody to hit the thumbs up button. Yeah, let's just say that one more time. If you're watching, hit that like button. Thank you, Screaming. Leah, how are you? And Satin B, 2 people getting in here. 40 minutes in, that's fine. That's okay. Good to see both of you. Thank you for joining us for the live show this evening. Dee says her lupus is killing her. I have an ex-girlfriend who's still a very close friend of mine, Dee, who has lupus. I'm very familiar with that disease. Very, very familiar. So that was the Albright poll. We conduct those every Friday, and this Saturday morning, you can look for the next one in the discussion group on Facebook, the Unfound Podcast discussion group. If you are not yet a member, please join. Let's move on to this. My friend April A. Bear sprung a surprise on me. Was it Sunday or Monday that she said, well, you know what? I was going to hold off to the 20th of April, but you know what? I decided to release the interview I did with you a week early on April 13th. And thank you, Cherie. If anybody, I brought up the think tank. If anybody would like to join us in the think tank on Sunday evenings, it is easily the most in-depth discussion group anywhere on this earth regarding missing persons cases. If you'd like to join, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And please join at the premium level of $12 a month or above. Thank you, Cherie, for reminding me to say that. Leah, thank you for your generosity. What Leah just did there, she hit the super chat button. And that is the little gray square with the $sign in the middle. You can contribute to Unfound. As you know, we are an ads-free podcast, although I do know that they add ads to the videos here on YouTube out of my control for the most part. So if you'd like to contribute to Unfound monetarily through PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast, or you can do it right now during this show, this live show, and using the super chat button, as long as the super chat is connected to, what is a Venmo, or is it Venmo, or a PayPal account, or a checking account, something like that. Leah, thank you very much. You're very generous. Thank you. So let's get back to my the interview that I did with April. Yeah, she told me, you know what, I'm going to release it on Tuesday, April 13th. So it came out yesterday. It is the Think It Through podcast, and I had great fun doing that interview with her. We only covered like half of the information that I sent her. She mentioned that I had sent her information beforehand. We only covered like half of it in that hour, but it was so great to talk to her. Have a lot of great memories working with her at Star Trek The Experience for those 4.5 years. I think she's doing a really good podcast. I think she's only 16 episodes in, so she's very new at this, but she's certainly very capable, certainly has the brains and all of that to do it. And I have to admit, it was my idea to be on her show. And I'm glad that she said absolutely, and we got it done. And you should know, though, that, and I'm going to get to this in a second, kind of going to do the same thing for the next show that I do with Dr. Telesco, which is coming up on April 22nd, next Thursday, where Dr. Telesco, I think, listened to the interview that I did with April, and she thought, well, can we do that kind of thing for next time? So instead of talking about one specific disappearance like I have since the beginning with Dr. Telesco, this time we're going to talk more about missing persons theory and talking and relating that to a variety of the disappearances that have been covered on Unfound. So that's going to be next Thursday. I'll get to that in a moment. But getting back to April's show, the only thing I would say about it is I didn't realize I talked so fast. Man, I was just blazing through those words. You don't realize it when you're doing that. I think I speak a lot more slowly on this live show, but during that interview with April, after I listened to it, I was like, wow, I could have done that FedEx commercial from the 1980s. But I enjoyed it, and it was good to get some of those ideas out into the world so other people can hear them. Her podcast is not a true crime podcast, so I'm thinking I'm going to be tapping into a different demographic, and hopefully that will bring more people to Unfound. And I'm hoping now that you've gotten to hear April's interview with me that you will start listening to her show as well and go back to listen, of course, some of the, going back and listening to her older episodes. It's all about thinking and critical thinking and logic and how it relates to a lot of different aspects of our lives and our culture. So I enjoyed that. I don't get to be on the other side too often. I guess with Dr. Telesco, every month that happens. But this is the first time where I've been interviewed about, more missing persons theory, and it's gotten out there. So that's very important to me. I appreciate April giving me the opportunity to do that. And like I said at the end of that show, if you've listened to it, if you haven't listened to it, please find it. iTunes. I don't know if it's on Spotify, but it's easy to find it. Just do a Google for the Think It Through podcast. It's the most recent episode. But I meant what I said at the end, that April, that her listeners should know that she's very highly thought of. We have many, many, many mutual friends because we all work together. And she's very highly thought of as a person, as an actress. I don't know if she still does it, but she used to do a lot of dinner theater, like murder mysteries. People show up and they have dinner, and then there's a murder mystery that's done around them with actors. She used to do that. Maybe she still does. I don't know, but she's very talented, and certainly one of the people that I remember from my Star Trek days. And it's good to keep in contact with her. Marlene says, Twinkle says, love the interview. Thank you, Twinkle. Marlene, good evening, Ed. And everyone just came on. Eating pizza. What kind of, Marlene, if you're going to bring up pizza, you got to tell us what kind of pizza it is. Gotta. Eileen, we are really enjoying April's show. Got my daughter and her friends listening. Awesome. And Marlene says she hit the like button on it. Excellent. So another thing that happened this week, man, I am everywhere. I'm on April's show, and then on Monday, so the day before, my Monday evening was so busy. I did the interview for this Friday's episode at 4, and then I did this. I was on kind of a panel, I guess you might call it that, at 7. Dr. Telesco asked me to take part in this webinar that was hosted by an author at 7. And then right after I was done with that, I had a conversation with a young man who I think will be eventually a guest on the program. His father went missing. So it was just right in a row, like 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock on Monday evening. But at 7 o'clock, I was involved in this webinar. Maybe some of you listened to it, got involved through Zoom. Dr. Ramslin is a woman who has written this book, Confessions of a Serial Killer. And she has had the opportunity to interview and get to know Denis Rader, also known as BTK, this guy who murdered women going back into the 1970s, into the 1980s. I think his last murder was in 1991, maybe. And she's gotten to know him, see what makes him tick, etc. So I think you can go to the Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice YouTube channel and see that entire show that Dr. Ramslin hosted, where she is the main speaker. It went about, I think, about an hour and a half. So please check that out. There was one thing that, and I got to ask a couple questions much later in those last maybe maybe last 15 minutes of that webinar. So maybe you will see that. And I appreciate Dr. Telesco asking me to be a part of that. But what caught my ear, now you should know that Denis Rader did his killings in Wichita, Kansas. But what caught my ear, about 20 minutes into this presentation that Dr. Ramsland made, she noted that at one time, Denis Rader had become obsessed, fixated on a TV show or a news host in Wichita. And it actually started to make plans to try to kill this woman, but did not go through with it. He did not kill her. This was well after his main era of killing was over. It was well after, like I said, about 1991. And he ended up getting caught, what was it, 2004, 2005. So there were 14 years where he seemingly didn't murder anybody before he got caught. But sometime in those 14 years, he had become obsessed, fixated on this news host because she looked like Annette Funicello. You might remember her. She's unfortunately deceased now, but she did all those beach blanket bingo movies with Frankie Avalon in the 1960s. And Denis Rader, I guess as a kid, must have had a fixation on a crush on Annette Funicello. This news host allegedly looked like her, and so he decided, I'm going to kill her, but he didn't do it. We should know that Wichita, Kansas is only 7 hours from Mason City, Iowa, where Jodi Huisentruit was attacked. And of course, she is still missing. And of course, she was a TV show host. And so I will just put this out there that I have sent a message to Caroline Lowe, who is part of FindJodi.com. Of course, she was a guest last November for Jodi Huisentruit's disappearance that we covered on Unfound, and I sent her that. And I told her, maybe you want to look into that. Maybe, is it possible that Denis Rader somehow, I don't know, was going through Mason City, Iowa for some reason? And, if he became obsessed on one news host, maybe he became obsessed on another news host. So I passed that along to Caroline Lowe. Of course, she knew who BTK is / Denis Rader, but I don't think she knows if he's ever been considered for Jodi's disappearance because he was certainly out of jail. He did not go to jail, did not get caught until like 2005. Of course, she disappeared in 1995. So if you watch that webinar, if you haven't watched it yet, when it gets to about the 20-minute mark, somewhere in there, you will see where she talks about that. And it was just something, like I said, as soon as she said it, I was like, well, that's interesting. But I think even if Denis Rader had nothing to do, I mean, it's a stretch, but still, even if he didn't, I think what this shows is that it is not outrageous to think that there was some stranger who became obsessed with Jodi and figured out where she lived and abducted her. If Denis Rader was certainly thinking about it, then we must be open to the idea that other people could be capable of it too. Because, the thing about Denis Rader is that was not really his modus operandi. He did not kill any women who were on TV or on the radio. Every woman that he killed didn't do anything like that. They might have had jobs, but nothing like that. Nothing so high profile. But that he was willing to get kind of out of his regular MO, was considering it. We must then consider that other people, men, can do that as well. So, and I, as you know, I think I continue to say that my first choice is not that older guy, John Van Cise, in Jodi's disappearance. I happen to believe that it was some viewer that became obsessed with her. I continue to think that for a variety of reasons. So when I heard that, I was like, well, I guess that more supports my theory that it could be a stranger. Linda says that was a very interesting webinar. I thought so too, Linda. I have to admit, I'm not much into serial killers. We've touched upon them. Gerard Schaefer came up because he's the main suspect in Debbie Lowe's disappearance going back to the early 1970s. We don't touch upon them too much. Really, the original Night Stalker was fascinating to me. I got the one book that was written years ago. But missing persons cases have always been number one in my mind. Jasmine says, yes, I heard the interview with Dr. Telesco. Great, Jasmine. Eileen says he never lived in Iowa, but he lived in Wichita, Kansas, which is about 7 hours away from Mason City. Screaming says, a friend of mine grew up a couple doors down from the Denis Rader family. Wow. He has a genuine family photo of them. He used to play with the daughter when they were little. Wow. Kat says, great job as usual. I love your channel, Kat. That's very kind. Thank you for saying shows. So from the Jersey Shore, I've been to the Jersey Shore, Kat. I know all about Seaside Heights before it became popular with that show that came out, what was it, in the late 90s, mid 2000s or whatever. I was going to Seaside Heights 1990, I think, and then many times to Seaside Heights. That's what I think of when I think of Jersey Shore. Also going way back, I've been to Atlantic City. So great to see you, Kat. Cherie says Israel Keys has become fascinating to me with his cache set up all around the United States. It certainly is fascinating. Once again, I just don't know how much he has really done. He's become, a legend. He's like the boogeyman now. I think that they've tried to connect him to a lot of different unsolved murders and disappearances. And so we're just really not sure how much he's done, but he's certainly known. Spicy, thank you for the contribution through super chat. Thanks for being you. Well, you know what, Spicy? Thanks for being you. Thank you. So check that out, that webinar with Dr. Ramsland. Maybe you want to get her book. I'm guessing, I have to admit, I've not read her book, but I'm guessing she gets way more into the details of her interaction with Denis Rader than she did in the webinar. Of course, we know about when authors go on these types of circuits, it's really just to whet your appetite to buy her book. And that's great. And I hope you do. Speaking of Dr. Telesco, next Thursday at 7 p.m., once again, Thursday, not Monday, but Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which means I'll be missing trivia next week. I will be meeting up again with Dr. Telesco, and we're going to switch it up. We're going to do something very much like what you heard with my friend April in her podcast. We're going to cover a lot of missing persons theory, just some concepts that I've come up with on my own. Of course, it'll be interesting because, of course, Dr. Telesco is ex-NYPD. So it'll be interesting for her to comment on some of these theories that I've put together just from 4.5 years of working on disappearance cases. So whereas April, not so much into true crime, but I think she did a great job interviewing me anyway. But this will probably be a different type of presentation with Dr. Telesco. So we're not going to cover a specific disappearance next Thursday. We're going to instead talk about theory, and then I'm going to take the opportunity to mention some different unfound disappearances and how they relate to those theories, how I used those particular disappearances to try to form some, concepts regarding how we should analyze disappearances and narrowing down the possibilities of what we think happened and try to improve how disappearances are investigated. It's very, very important part of Unfound education. It's all about education here. So let's go. Really, I have to admit, I only got one question before the show started tonight, so I'm going to answer it right now. It's a long one. I'm going to read the whole thing. Laura asked me, have you heard that they brought back John Walsh's America's Most Wanted on CBS on Monday nights? I did hear about that, Laura. Have you seen it? I've not seen it, Laura. Do you think shows like this can be helpful in solving cold cases? I think they can. Certainly. I think that this kind of exposure, it can't hurt. However, we can't deny that sometimes when things get that popular, if the show is popular, you do tend to bring out a lot of kooks out too. You get a lot of misinformation. You got a lot of people coming forward who really don't know anything. You get a lot of people who think that they can read minds, and they think that they can read palms, and they think this, and they can see the future. And a lot of people like that watching those types of shows, thinking they have special powers, special abilities, and calling in and offering up tips, and it's nothing. So I think it can be helpful, but I also know that it usually causes, if investigators are going to take any of it seriously, they certainly have to then follow a lot more dead ends. But it's better being on them than not being on there. Or do you think as long as suspects do not come forward that it doesn't matter? Well, Laura, it just depends on the type of, hello, Jody. It just depends on the type of disappearance. If we're going to talk about, I can't speak about to unsolved murders, but I can certainly speak to missing persons cases. It depends on what kind of missing persons case it is. I have to tell you, I am not the type of person who says, well, somebody out there knows something. I'm not inclined to believe that. Certainly, if there was foul play, then certainly somebody knows something. If that suspect is not deceased at this time. But we also have to be open to the idea that there are people who walked off, and they did it all on their own. They didn't leave a note. They didn't tell anybody. They never intimated they were going to do it. Nothing. They just did it on their own. And in that case, I don't know if the saying someone knows something is applicable. So I think that someone knows something has become a little bit of a cliche to me. I'm not saying it's not true, but it's just a little too general of a statement. You have to look at each disappearance on its own. Of course, there are similarities between different disappearances, but if a person walked off on his or her own, I don't know then how anybody else, would know anything about it. So it just depends. I saw the show. It's hosted by Elizabeth Vargas from Dateline, and it mostly shown people wanted for murder, but they did have a segment where they showed some missing persons cases, new and old. Well, that's great. That's fine by me, as long as they get the facts right. But I did know the show would come back out, and we'll see how it does. But, you should know something, not just for Laura, but all of you. TV shows don't get the ratings that they used to. The ratings that TV shows get now on what we would call cable TV or whatever are nothing compared to cable TV ratings in the 1970s and 1980s. The fact is, there are a lot less eyeballs on regular TV these days. Why? Because there's so much different entertainment that people can watch. There are so many different channels. Of course, there's Netflix and Disney Plus and HBO Max and Paramount's new pay-per-view or whatever it's called. And so it may be that America's Most Wanted is back out, but you just have to remember it's probably not being seen by as many people as when America's Most Wanted was out in the 1990s. Although I've met him. I wouldn't say he remembers me, but several years ago, I think it was 2012, I met Rob Long. And he was a former producer, TV producer for Cheers, a very, very, very popular, of course, comedy from the 1980s. Well, these days, sometimes he is still called in to run a show or something. And he has written and has talked about how the ratings for shows today on TV, even something like The Big Bang Theory, which is one of the most popular shows in the last 10 years, the ratings it gets would be dwarfed by most shows in the 1980s. So I think we just have to remember that America's Wanted is back. That's great. But there are just less eyeballs on it today than there used to be because people, once again, you have 1,000 more choices than you did in the 1980s and 1990s for a variety of reasons, mostly due to the internet. Thank you, Spicy, for that. Cherie says, we got a fax the other day about a boy in our area that went missing from the Adam Walsh. We got it from the Adam Walsh Foundation. Thought that was kind of cool. First one we have ever received. He's been found. That is interesting. Cherie, I wonder how your fax number got on their list. Cherie, that's interesting. Delane says, I was pretty disappointed that his crew said there wasn't enough gore to air a case. Yep. Recent guest said that. A recent guest said that. And I have to admit, that doesn't really surprise me at all. Knowing what I think I know about TV and about true crime and everything, that doesn't surprise me at all. Jody, thank you for the contribution. You're very generous, and we are going to keep it up here at Unfound. Thank you. Shree says, I agree, and a lot of times the person that knows something isn't going to say anything, so what's the point? Denise, you have to follow everything on a missing persons case. Learn the hard way in my families. You just can't rule out anything. And that's why I said, one of the first things that a family should do when a family member goes missing is write down all the people who would have wanted to harm that person and immediately find out what those people's alibis are. As you are calling the police, 911, filling out that missing person report, you start thinking about a list and you start tracking those people down and find out where they were when your loved one went missing. Because that is the information that gets lost the fastest. Why? Because a week from now, nobody can remember where they were at a particular time. So you have to do that immediately. Coffee lover. Hi, Ed. If someone walks off on their own, how could they live? We have to show ID for everything these days. Yeah, Coffee, all I can tell you is there's enough evidence to show that it happens. It's not very common. I don't think anybody out there believes it's very common. It's probably 0.005% of all missing persons cases. But being there are so many disappearances out there, it amounts to a number. It's just not a very large number compared to missing persons cases overall. People figure it out. Some of them end up homeless. Some of them have planned this in advance and figure out a way to get a new ID and go somewhere else. I brought up during my discussion with April of a young woman who lived in Virginia, moved to New York City, changed her name, changed her look, changed her heritage, her ethnicity by looking a different way. And she successfully did that. And then 15, 18 years later, she's decided to get back in touch with her family. She figured out how to do it. It's a lot of work, and there's no guarantee that it's going to work out, and there's certainly dangers involved, but you don't know what the kind of situation these people are in to want to be doing that. They may feel that they're doing that is better than what they're doing right now. And if they think that the grass is greener doing something else and changing their name and everything, a lot of people are going to do that. But like I said, I still believe it's a very small percentage. Laura, thanks. You are right about people walking off. I've learned recently that more people walk off than what we normally would think. That I've certainly changed my mind on that, Laura. I can admit, when I change my mind, but I'm not going to say it's gone, my perception has gone, the percentages from 0.005% to 10%. It's probably gone from more like 0.05 or something like that to 0.08 or 0.1 or something. I think the percentage is still very low. Those people who are walking off to try to start a new life somewhere. Now, as far as walking off and because they wanted to commit suicide or people who walk off and it's an accident somewhere, maybe an Alwin Albright situation, they have a heart attack or something, then that's certainly a higher percentage, my perception. But the people who decide to walk off, start a new life, it's certainly a low number. But I will tell you, we've covered over 200 disappearances now, and I can think of a couple right off the top of my head where I think that did happen, but I'm not, just that wouldn't be right for me to say that. But there are at least a couple that come to mind where I think, that I do think that that's the most likely choice. And these people are out there somewhere. Yeah, Coffee says, he's including suicide. Thank you. Sheree says that she did look into how they ended up on the fax machine, and they send them to all registered fax numbers. So anybody who has a fax number got it in the area, even if they've don't know anything about missing persons cases, didn't know anything. Okay. Hello, Debbie. Debbie says she finally made it, and I like the way she spelled finally, Finely. That's like a little pun there, I think, Debbie. I love it. I love wordplay. Finally, I made it. You did make it fine, Debbie. Thank you. All right. So that is the sole question. So if anybody has any other questions they'd like to ask, you can ask them. Now, remember, this is the next topic anyway. Just want to once again give you a preview of the next couple of weeks. This Friday, we're going to do a regular episode where we cover a disappearance. And then next Friday will be the Q&A episode. What that will be, it will be a culmination of a lot of questions that I've gotten on this live show over the last, let's say, 6 months. And then hopefully that will be combined with some questions I get between now and then that people want me to answer on that Q&A episode. Now, you may say, well, Ed, why would you answer questions on the Q&A episode that you've already answered on the live show? Well, the easy answer, the main answer, the primary answer is that, frankly, a lot of people don't watch this live show. A lot of people who download the episodes and listen to them don't watch this live show. The numbers for the episodes on Fridays are much higher than this live show, and I'm fine with that. That's not how I grade the program. But I think those other people, though, being that they do are subscribers to the podcast, and they do download it every week, and they do listen to the episodes and take an interest, I think they have a right to hear the answers to some of these questions as well. So I know for all of you who join me in this show every week, some of it's going to be a little bit of a repeat next Friday, but maybe you'll hear something new in there too. So that will be the Q&A episode next Friday. How long is it going to go? Probably a couple hours. Probably. I don't know yet. I will start recording that at the beginning of next week. And I only do that once a year. I think that I've seen some YouTube shows that aren't necessarily true crime, that they seem to do it more often than that, where they have these Ask Me Anything AMA shows. And they seem to do it more than once a year. I'm comfortable just doing that type of show once a year because, once again, I answer questions, random questions from the audience every Wednesday during this show. So that'll be April 23rd. And then April 30th will be update episode number 8. And I continue to say that I don't know how long that episode's going to be. It strikes me that it's going to be shorter than the last couple. There just hasn't been a lot going on. Maybe it's just a percentages thing, or maybe it's a COVID thing. I don't know, but it doesn't seem that we will have as many updates for that one as maybe the last few. But that's what's coming up. And then the prediction is, of course, come the first Friday in May, we'll go back to covering individual disappearances like we usually do. Delane says, these days it's pretty difficult for someone to adopt a new identity and just walk off into the sunset. A reporter actually tried going off the grid, and he was actually eventually located. I'd love to find his article regarding that. Well, it's certainly true, Delane, but I don't think any reporter can put himself or herself really in the shoes of somebody who is desperate. So I appreciate the reporter trying to do it, but the person is just doing it for work and is getting paid to do that and realizes that, well, I'm not really going off the grid. I'm going to come back and I have family and everything else. Whereas I think the people that choose to do this, are committed. This is their life. It's just not a job. It's their life. Whereas this reporter, is playing pretend. We just have to remember that. But once again, it's rare. But there's certainly a difference between a person who is just going to try to role play and somebody who really, really is set on doing it because they are in some situation physically or mentally that they have to do it. They just got to do this. And if they can't do it, they just don't want to be around here anymore. So, there you go. It's just no different. I know reporters, go undercover, and reporters have, gone in and, pretended to be inmates just to see what it's like living in a jail and everything. It's not the same because they know they can get out anytime. They know that at the snap of the fingers, if things get a little too tough, they can just say, you know what, I'm going home. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to sit down with some popcorn and a beer and, I can be done. Whereas people who are in jail for the rest of their lives or for a very long time, it's certainly a different experience. It's just not the same. Okay, moving on. I think I can reveal this right now. I don't mind doing this. I can't make a prediction when it's going to happen, but I'm going to tell all of you now. I think I've already told my assistants that I'm guessing in the near future, which I'm going to say within the next few months, that Unfound will be covering the disappearance of Brian Schaffer. Made that decision. You know that we take great pride in covering a lot of disappearances that aren't very well known. And we love making them known. And that certainly has happened. But with Brian's case, being that I've, of course, referenced it so much because people do know about it. It's an easy kind of a touchstone. You just say it and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Even people who don't really follow any true crime podcasts at least have the generalities of Brian Schaffer's disappearance. So you can use it as a good example for a lot of different things. We will be covering that in the near future. Like I said, within the next couple months. I've been in touch with somebody for quite a while now, going back to maybe 2018, 2017, who has become what I would call the public expert on his disappearance. And I've known her for a while. And so I've talked to her and she's up for it. And although we've not spoken on the phone yet, about the details and everything, but she says, oh yeah, absolutely. Let's do this. So I'm going to make that happen. Once again, really can't give a prediction. I don't like to jinx these types of things and to give you a date or anything because there's not been an interview that's been done yet or anything like that. And I certainly know how interviews can fall through as well as anybody on this earth. So, but I just wanted to let all of you know, we will cover Brian Schaffer's disappearance like we've covered all others. It will not get special treatment. There will not be a lot of theorizing or anything else. We're just going to cover it straight like we do every other one, whether it's well-known or not. Jody Huisentruit, fairly well-known. What did we do? We covered it just the way we cover a lot of other disappearances that aren't as well-known. So in covering Brian's, we're not going to make a big hoopla about it or anything else. Brian Schaffer, in our eyes, is just as important as everybody else And he's not important. More important, his disappearance is not more important than everybody else's is. I think that I have to admit, I think that a lot of times some podcasts have covered his disappearance because they know it's so popular and they know that they'll get a lot of listens. I'm going to cover it. I've made the decision to cover it because we've talked about it so much. I've used it as a comparison to a lot of the disappearances that we've covered on Unfound. So it's about time to officially cover it the way we do things. And just because we do things a different way. So that's why we're going to do it. Eileen says, again, I can't wait for you to cover this one. Thanks, Eileen. Marlene, yes, I've followed Brian Schaffer. I'll be looking forward to that one. Okay, Marlene, thanks. Let's move on to this. And I predict with Brian Schaffer's, of course, I'll probably be doing a video for that, a video on YouTube for that. I'm guessing right at this second. And once again, like all the others that have been covered on Unfound. Let's move on to this. I posted in the group, or yeah, did I post it? I think I posted it. There was a search done in Cleveland yesterday on April 13th, 2021. They were searching for the remains of Ashley Summers. You'll remember that she was a young woman who disappeared actually quite a few years ago. And she was living with her great uncle, Kevin Donathan, and he said that she just walked off and disappeared. You will remember that Linda is her name, who used to be a part of the Summers family, was the guest for that episode. When did we cover that disappearance? Was that in 2018, maybe? I'm trying to think, was that before or after my mother died? I think that was before. And she allegedly walked off. But since then, Kevin Donathan has been convicted or pled guilty to rape and prostitution. And it certainly has put him as the main suspect in Ashley's disappearance. And there may even be others who might have been in on it, maybe. But it certainly doesn't help that she goes missing and then he gets charged with these crimes just recently. So many years after she disappeared, Ashley disappeared, he has now been charged and he's in jail. And I think he's going to be in jail for a long time. And I still remember the first time, one of those first times speaking to Linda before we did an official interview, is that she was telling me about this guy, Kevin. And I can even remember telling her, there's something up with this guy. This was well before any charges, any rumors, anything. Regarding, what we now know about him. And it just said, there's something about this guy that doesn't sound right. And there it was like a year and a half later, something like that, that he gets charged with all of these horrible crimes. So because of that, he's now the main suspect, but there was a search. It was on a place called Train Avenue in Cleveland, maybe about 2 miles from where Ashley was living with her great uncle Kevin. But I think they found some animal bones, and they did not find any human bones. But it seemed to come out of nowhere. I did not get any heads up on this. It was just an article that popped up. But it's good to know that law enforcement in Cleveland have not forgotten about her. But I think anybody who knows anything about that disappearance believes that Kevin Donathan did something to her, and so far has gotten away with it. I don't think it's a coincidence that he gets charged with all these crimes and he was the last person to see her. And if you'll remember, in that interview that I did with Linda, that there continues to be a discrepancy regarding where some of these family members were living at the time. And I urge you to go back and listen to that episode now to hear that, because family members have said that there was a particular party and she was there and it was at this particular location. But Linda still insists that none of those people even lived at that location where that party was at the time that Ashley disappeared, that they lived somewhere else. Is that just people messing up their time frames or something? Or could there be something to that? I would urge you to go back and listen to that episode. Once again, I think that was in 2018. Kathy says that was towards the end of 2018. Must have been, yeah, that then would have been right around when my mother died. That might have been right before. Might have been October 2018, Kathy. Cherie says she lost the chat. Well, where'd it go, Cherie? I can still see it. Hope we have a good connection here. So that'll probably be another update. You can add that to the update list for the episode for the update episode that will come out and in a couple weeks. We'll have to add that one in there. The next item that I want to talk about is this, the disappearance, and I guess they've now found her remains of Kori Gauthier. Gauthier. I heard it pronounced before the episode started, and now that I know it's Gauthier. It's one of those French names that you pronounce it not the way it looks. It's kind of like, being that I'm going to mention him in a moment, Jake Lachelay. I don't think that anybody would think that Latiolais would be Lachelay, but it is. But Kori Gauthier, Gauthier. I know. But this young woman, she went missing on April 7th of 2021. And that her car was found on a bridge over the Mississippi. Sound familiar? And it was found when somebody else driving across the bridge wrecked into it. And since this has happened, there have been stories, could have been foul play or whatever else. Did she really jump into the river? Well, her remains were found downriver from where her car was left on that bridge. And reading an article right before I started the show, it does seem that her family at this point are satisfied, unfortunately, with the idea that Kori drove out onto that bridge and jumped for whatever reason. They have enough between her phone information and video information and all of it put together that it does seem that for some reason she drove out onto that bridge and jumped. And I have to tell you, I will admit that because of the similarities to Jake Lachelay's disappearance, I was considering it for an Unfound now, but of course, won't have to do that now. But what does this mean for Jake Lachelay's disappearance, being that his truck was found on a bridge over the Mississippi, but his remains have still not been found? Well, I think on one hand that as we were just talking about, people make these decisions. I don't think anybody, at least the way I understand it, could have predicted that Kori would drive out onto that bridge and leave her car and jump. So people's actions are unpredictable. We don't know what's going on in people's heads. We can look at them and they can talk to us, but just because the way people act and what they say is not always indicative of what's going on up here. A lot of people are putting on very good shows, putting on a certain facade when behind the scenes, that's not really what, is going on with them. So what it shows is people do drive out onto bridges and jump and leave their cars there. So in Jake Lachelay's case, I guess it could be said then that it makes it more likely that that is what he did. He himself went out there and jumped for whatever reason. Of course, he was having girl problems at that time. A lot of things going on in Jake's life. On the other hand, it seems, now it's what today? April 14th. So it's been a week. They found her remains in the Mississippi River fairly quickly. In fact, I have to say that I think that her family should be happy since we now know that she jumped. They should be happy that they found them at all. But it only took a week to find her remains, knowing approximately what time that she could have been out there and looking at the current and everything else. They figured it out and found her remains, and it's very sad. So if Jake jumped, why didn't he get found? because they searched the river for him as well and didn't find anything. So it might take us in the opposite direction, being that Kori was found and Jake wasn't found. Maybe that means Jake didn't jump. This is what makes disappearances so difficult. You can look at a disappearance, or at least a death, with Kori's death, seemingly a suicide, and it can make you go both directions. Well, on one hand, it does prove that people do go out into bridges over the Mississippi and jump. On the other hand, it proves that maybe finding bodies in the Mississippi River, maybe it's not as difficult as everybody thinks, as long as you know the approximate time and place where the person went into the river. Jake hasn't been found. And I do know that his mother, Tina, has been following Kori's disappearance very closely. Of course, absolutely. Now, what does this maybe mean for maybe like Shane Fells? Remember, he had a car wreck right next to the Mississippi River. Maybe he went into the river. The big difference is it's much harder to understand why he would wreck his car and end up in the river than Kori stopping her car in the middle of the bridge. I mean, we all know what that looks like. When people stop their cars in middle of bridges, unless the car is broken down, that's usually a bad sign. Whereas I'm guessing there have been many people over the years who've wrecked their cars next to a river and didn't end up in it. So even with Shane Fells, even though his disappearance occurred right next to the Mississippi River, it's really not like Jake's or Kori's. It's a totally different type. And it's really much harder to understand. We know that people do jump off bridges and commit suicide. We know that. Golden Gate Bridge, #1 suicide spot in the United States. Whereas it's much harder to understand why young man Shane Fell would get into a wreck, call his brother to pick him up. Brother gets there 20 minutes later, and Shane's not there. And I of course, talked about that during my discussion with my friend April on her podcast. Delane says, wasn't the woman interviewed at one time married to a family member? That's right. That's Linda Summers. You're right, Delane. For Ashley Summers, that's right. Her name is Linda. Yes. And she's still in the group. She, I have to admit, she's kind of backed away from representing the family with Ashley's disappearance. I think I can say that, but that's really all I want to say. So she's keeping a much lower profile now, but that is true. She was married to Ashley's grandfather. Cherie says you can't find logic in an illogical action. That's right, Cherie. Somebody's been listening to the show that I did with April. Eileen, well, I do think that Jake jumped. He also had a shady characters that will probably always make the family question that. Yeah. But once again, I'm not an expert in Kori's disappearance. But it does seem that there could have, at least at the time on April 7th, April 8th, April 9th, it does seem to me that some people were making it out that there could have been some foul play involved here. But it now seems, at least the article that I saw as of today, when her remains were found, that her family seems content in the idea that Kori took her own life. Kathy says, Ashley Summers, December 21st, 2018. So right after, a month after my mother died. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, 2018. Shri, also, so many factors when people jump into the large bodies of water: temperature, tides, timing, etc. It's true. That's true. A lot of people who jump into bodies of water are never found. People who jump off of cruise ships, who commit suicide on cruise ships. Of course, we have GPS on these cruise ships. They know exactly where they are every second that they're out in the Caribbean or anywhere else. They can maybe come up with an approximate time of when this person could have gone overboard, and they'll turn around and they'll look, and they know the currents and everything else, and the person's still not found. Very well could be the person drowned, was underwater. But eventually, bodies do end up coming back to the surface, usually, unless they get attacked by a shark or something. But yeah, that plays a huge role, Cherie. Linda, and if there were locks or large debris, that's true too, Linda. Cherie says she thinks the text messages led Kori's family to the conclusion that she did commit suicide. Is that what you're saying, Cherie? Got a couple pronouns in there, but I think I get what you're saying, Cherie. Is that Screaming says in 2019, a 70-year-old named Juji Thao jumped into the Mississippi River here in St. Paul, Minnesota. He was never found. Okay. Thank you, Screaming. Not familiar with that. Now, the other item that I want to cover before I discuss this Friday's disappearance is everything that has gone on with Kristen Smart's case within the last few days. Now, you should know I am not an expert on her disappearance. Okay. I will admit that at one time I entertained the idea of covering disappearance, just never got around to it. What's interesting is a guy who's been on this program a couple times, Dennis Mahan, knows the Smart family, helped them going back some years. He was the interview for the Kent Jacobs disappearance that we did in August of 2017. And then in, I guess it would have been 2018, he was also the guest for the Kristen Modafferi disappearance in San Francisco because he knows both of those families, was very involved. Well, he's been very involved in Kristen's disappearance. And we had talked about doing an interview, but just once again, never got around to it. So I am certainly not an expert on this disappearance. I'm sure most of you or some of you know more about it and have followed it much more closely than I have. But I just want to offer up some comments on how this compares to other disappearances that Unfound has covered and just missing persons in general. Of course, she disappeared in 1996. She had gone out partying, going to some bars or whatever else. And the last time she was seen, she was walking with this guy, Paul Flores. And since I think the day of her disappearance, he has been the number one suspect. But we have to also realize this was 1996. In 1996, I was still living in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. I was 2 years away from even moving to Las Vegas. I was dating a woman named Janie. Was working for my family. I mean, I'm just in a totally, 25 years ago, it's a while. Of course, that's a year after Jody Huisentruit disappeared. And of course, Paul said that the last time he saw her, she was walking toward her dorm, and then he had a black eye and he was making all sorts of different excuses for it. But I think for all these years, he has always been the number one suspect. Now, it should know that, yes, he's been charged with her murder, and his father has been charged now with an accessory after the fact, seemingly maybe helping his son cover up allegedly what he did to Kristen. Now, something that caught my eye right away in looking at this just over the last couple of days, all of this, is that Kristen was not a small woman. I'm not saying she was overweight. She was 6'1". And, this is one of those things where I don't think, it comes down with, she's, she can talk about, well, she could fight, or even for men. Well, he's a big guy. He can take care of himself. In a lot of these situations, I don't think size means a thing. I think, of course, what meant more in this situation is that it very well could be that Paul drugged her, slipped her something at this bar so he could rape her. And was walking her home and did just that. I think that's a very likely scenario. But her being 6'1" did not intimidate her at all. I mean, I'm 5'9". She'd be 4 inches taller than I am. That's fine. But, her size did not matter. And so we just have to keep that in mind when we start thinking about, well, I think she would have been able to fight, any disappearance. I think she would have been able to fight the guy off or whatever. But if there are mitigating circumstances like being surprised, like being drunk, like being drugged, those certainly overcome any sort of size or ability or any skills like self-defense skills or even carrying a gun or anything else. If you are drunk, if you've been slipped a drug or something like that, that certainly diminishes your ability to defend yourself. Now, what's unclear to me, though, is that, I've read that this guy who is a singer, and I didn't write down, Chris Lambert, I think wasn't he a singer on American Idol? He won one of those. I've never watched it, but he does a podcast, and he ended up talking about Kristen's disappearance. Maybe he's from that area, San Luis Obispo. And he brought attention to it. And I've read, in fact, Caroline Lowe was the one that told me this earlier today, is that, some witness or somebody like that, came forward because of that podcast. And I think that's great. That's fantastic. That's what we're all trying to do out here. What's unclear to me, though, is why didn't this witness come forward earlier? Did this witness not realize that he or she knew something? Did this person not come forward because they were afraid? Adam Lambert, not Chris Lambert. Adam Lambert. Thank you, Kathy. I'm not saying that information is not out there. I just haven't seen it. What would cause somebody to come forward and figure out, oh yeah, I know something 25 years later? It's very unique, very rare, very, 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 very rare. Let me read some of these comments and then I will continue. Marlene says that is sad about Kori. It is. Yes, no sign of Jake Lachelay or Shane Fell. Puma, the mother, Paul, should be charged also. Okay, Puma. Eileen agrees with Puma. No way she didn't know, and at the very least, she had known her son needed help for years and did nothing. Cherie agrees with Puma. Adam Lambert. Thank you, Kathy, and got that first name wrong. No, it's not Adam Lambert. Is it Adam Lambert? No, it's not Adam. I thought it was, man, I know it's, once again, I think it's the guy from, maybe not, but he's a singer who does a podcast, and he mentioned Kristen Smart's disappearance. And once again, I heard or read, was told that this led to some type of musician Chris Lambert. I did get it right. Beginning of September 30th, 2019, musician Chris Lambert released a series of 8 podcast episodes. Chris Lambert is the Highlander. Yeah. Well, his actually, Christopher Lambert is how you pronounce his last name. Yes, there can be only one. Right. Well, this is a singer. He did this, as Linda wrote, 8-part series, and I think I saw that on Wiki as well, Wikipedia as well. But what's unclear is from a person who studies disappearances, I would certainly like to know who this person was and why they figured out that they finally needed to come forward and why they didn't come forward earlier. And I'm guessing that there has been a reward out all these years, and maybe this once again proves rewards don't work. So, but the time, we also have to remember Kristen Smart's disappearance, I would not say is what I would call would be a big mystery. I think that it seems to me since day one, people knew who did it, just couldn't prove it. Maybe like Angela Green's that we covered last year. Maybe like Rosemary Rapp's that we covered even further back, going back, I think, into 2017. Disappearances where we know that foul play happened, but there's just no evidence of it. And so it's certainly great that it looks like this is all going to come to a conclusion. I don't know if Kristen Smart's remains have been found. Maybe they're going to find them on the Flores property, whatever. But we also have to remember this is not some, huge mystery. It was just something that things just needed to be done. Kind of like Andrea Bowman's disappearance. It was just, it just finally took 30 years for Dennis Bowman to be properly investigated. So I'm not sure what has changed. since her disappearance, except for allegedly this person coming forward. Adams from American Idol, he was second in 2008. Linda, unfortunately, a lot of people just don't want to get involved. Eileen, they haven't found remains yet. Yes, thank you, Eileen. Well, Linda, you're right. A lot of people don't want to get involved, but what would cause somebody to get involved 25 years later? I wouldn't know that. I realize people don't want to get involved. What's important to me is when they choose to get involved and they do know something that's helpful, and what is that the straw that broke the camel's back to say, one day I'm not going to say anything. The next day I get up, oh yeah, I got to say something. These are the kinds of things that fascinate me, because certainly, although I am not, once again, somebody who believes that somebody knows something, but I certainly believe in many of the disappearances that we've covered that maybe somebody does know something and just either doesn't know it or is keeping quiet about it. And so what is it that can push that person just that extra ounce to come forward and reveal some helpful information? Kind of like Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman's case. We now know that there were women who were around those three guys who murdered the Freemans and those two girls. There were women who were hanging out with these guys and knew exactly what they did and never said anything because of fear, allegedly. What I would say is, though, even after these guys died, at least two of them, none of these people said anything. None of them came forward. So what is the difference then between 1996 and this person knowing something and 2021 and this person knowing something? Maybe this person didn't find something out until years later. Still, I'd like to know. Will we ever know? Will we ever know who this person is? Will we ever know their name? Is this somebody in the Flores family? Is this a friend? Is this some guy friend? Paul Flores got drunk one night and confessed to this guy, and he decided to keep it, deep inside. I don't know. But I think what also this shows is you can't give up hope. I think that with Kristen Smarts, I think there was a belief out there that even though Paul Flores is walking around a free man, he seemingly killed Kristen Smart, that he was going to go uncharged for his entire life, and then things change. You never know how quickly this stuff can change. I think what's one of the main points I've learned over 4.5 years. It's not something that is ramping up, then boom. It's like nothing, and then big reveal. Seems like that is the way all the time. Crystal Morrison's, Zoe Campos's, of course, Tom Brown's remains being found, Austin Pivo. It just seems like it comes out of nowhere anymore sometimes. Cherie says, what changed was they got a new sheriff. Okay, you think that was a big deal. Okay, Cherie. Linda, maybe to clear their conscience. Maybe Puma. Yes, thankfully, he didn't give up. So you're saying that because there was a change in leadership in the county and law enforcement, that was a big deal. Okay. San Luis Obispo is not a large city, only 45,000 people. So they'll keep searching for her remains. Of course, I'm hoping that Paul Flores does have a guilty conscience and just says, yes, this is where we're going to find her, and they go there and they find her. We can hope. I hope this does not become an Angie Yarnell situation where Paul Flores gets charged, goes to jail, and her remains are never found, or like Teresa Butler, which is still a travesty of justice. I hope that does not happen. That drives me nuts. Yes, San Luis Obispo is SLO to most Californians. Well, I'm going to remember that, Eileen. I need to know the local lingo. So if I ever go to California again, I'll just say, yeah, I've been up to SLO before instead of calling it San Luis Obispo. Because when I see SL, I start thinking Salt Lake. Of course, that's a C or SLC, Salt Lake City. They usually do SLC. So Kristen Smart, Paul Flores, and his father charged with her murder going back to 1996. I think it's a very well-known disappearance, kind of up on the Jennifer Kesse, Tara Grinstead level, maybe Mara Murray, Brian Schaffer level, maybe even. So I'm hoping they have enough I hope they have a lot of evidence and can charge these guys and convict them, but most importantly, find Kristen's remains. Produced slow. So you don't say SLO, you just call it slow. You Californians, Eileen. Marlene, I've heard of Paul Flores for years about Kristen Smart. At one time, they thought maybe Scott Peterson was a person of interest. I think I do remember that, Marlene. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about that. I think that there are a lot of disappearances that Unfound is covered, very much like Kristen's, where it's believed that a guy or men did something and just not able to prove it. You know, maybe another disappearance that's like hers is Susie Lyles. It's something a disappearance that pops up to me that could be like Kristen Smart's. All right, so let's move on to we got it's 10:50 p.m., 10:51 p.m. Eastern time. So let's move on to this Friday's episode. I wouldn't call this a real well-known episode. It's certainly not on the has not gotten the media coverage. For example, Jennifer Kesse, some of those that I just named. But this is a disappearance that has been featured on Disappeared. This Friday, we are covering the disappearance of Skylar Tosic, Tosic, specifically Skylar Gregory Peterson Tosic. And but we will be calling him Sky during the interview. I interviewed his mother, Olivia, on Monday. That interview went over an hour and a half. He disappeared from Escondido, California, going down the opposite direction from SLO, from LA, going south of LA instead of north of LA, Eileen. He disappeared from Escondido, California on August 30th, 2015. And I am calling this episode Uber to Ride, because on the day of his disappearance, he has taken an Uber from his house to this area that had an affiliation to San Diego Safari Park. Took an Uber ride near there, and the driver let him out, and Sky was never seen again. But what plays, I think, a major role, something that I think all of you will really have to analyze, and we try to cover it as best we could during the interview, were those couple days before. Because it seems in the couple days before August 30th, when he officially went missing, Sky was making some odd choices and being somewhat secretive. On August 28th, he took an Uber ride as well to that exact same area. And allegedly went camping, allegedly and hiking. But he ends up at this place called the San Pasqual Academy, and his mother and family did not find out about this till after he disappeared. And somebody from that academy gave him a ride home on August 30th. Well, he wasn't home that long, and he turned around, got an Uber again without telling his family. He just kind of left the house without telling them. And that is the last time that he was seen. If you'll remember the Disappeared episode, in that episode, I forget what year it came out. Don't know. But they tried to make a connection between Sky's disappearance and another young man who went missing from El Cajon, California, his name being Elijah Bear Diaz. Now, you should know that I have spoken to Elijah's mother in the past. Of course, she has not yet been interviewed for an episode of Unfound. We talk about that in the interview. I bring that up to Olivia, and we do talk about it at least a little bit. I'm not going to give away what she had to say. I want you to hear her say it for herself. but it is helpful that I've also it's weird. I got to talk to Olivia about there possibly being a connection between Sky's and Elijah's disappearance. But I also got to speak to Elijah's mother about a possible connection between his disappearance and Sky's. So I've had an opportunity to get both of their points of view on it. And I do talk about that during the interview. Now, another, strange part of this case is that in the days before Skyler went missing, he was talking about having two friends named Thaddeus and Eli. Nobody knows who these people are. Nobody that knew Sky very well had ever seen them. He never introduced them to them, never came over to his house, no last names, nothing. And neither of these, if they exist, neither of these two people have ever come forward. These guys have ever come forward after Sky went missing to say, oh yeah, we were friends with Sky. Have never come forward. On the evening of the August 30th, after he left his parents' place and his mother's place and got this Uber, he sent her a text saying he was with two rich older women and they had passports. And that is the last communication, seemingly, that Sky sent to anybody. Once again, these women have never been identified if they exist. So that is going to be this Friday's episode, the disappearance of Skyler Tosic, T-O-S, once again, T-O-S-I-C, disappeared August 30th, 2015, from Escondido, California. The guest is his mother, Olivia, and the name of the episode is Uber to Ride. And I will be doing a YouTube video for this disappearance to help out where the Tosics were living, where this safari park is, where this academy is, and show you the surrounding area. I will do that tomorrow sometime. I will either upload it tomorrow night or Friday morning. So Cherie says, I think the new sheriff certainly helped. Before they were focused on education for young co-eds to be careful with alcohol intake. Not saying that's a bad idea, but it's not going to find Kristen. Eileen, I lived in Escondido for several years. Can't wait to hear more. I was familiar with Bear Diaz, but not Sky. Kathy, I'm familiar with both Bear and Sky's disappearances. Well, I can't wait to hear what you're going to have to say about that. Both of you, Eileen and Kathy, in the think tank on Sunday evening. I'm looking forward to that. So what did we do tonight? Of course, talked about disc golf. We talked about music very early on in the program, 70s and 80s. And of course, it always comes up how I dislike country music. It's been beautiful here the last few days. I hope it continues to this weekend for this disc golf tournament I'll be having right over there in that direction. Really working on my diet, continuing to work on my abs. I'm looking fantastic at 50, feeling fantastic. I'm down to 183 pounds. My goal is about 175, so I still have a ways to go. Told you I am going to get a different car, not a new car, but another car and get rid of my Sonata. And I'm not going to tell you what it is that I'm looking at, but when it happens, all of you will know. Talked about the Alwin Albright poll. Talked about my appearance on the Think It Through podcast. Talked about the webinar regarding Denis Rader. Next Thursday with Dr. Telesco. Don't forget. Mark it on your calendars. I gave you a preview of the next two, next Friday and the Friday after for the rest of April. Talked about Brian Schaffer, Ashley Summers, the disappearance of Kori Gauthier, and how her remains have been found. Talked about Kristen Smart. Took a question from Laura. Took a couple questions from all of you in the chat tonight. It's been spectacular. And then finished with talking about this Friday's episode, the disappearance of Sky Tosic. And Leah's leaving. Got to go to work now. See you, Leah. And for the rest of you, you all be hearing me on Friday. You'll be hearing me for a YouTube video that I'll do for Sky's disappearance. And then some of you in the think tank, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. We'll be talking about Sky's disappearance on Sunday evening. I do not anticipate any time changes. I think 7 p.m. Eastern will be fine. And that's about it. Yes, keep your head on a swivel out there, as Cherie typed, and be safe out there. And summer is almost here. Can't wait. Good night.